Good morning, Well Church. This is the Overflow podcast, episode 10 today.
Wow, 10 episodes and many more to go, I'm sure.
That's right. So, Matt Bruner, Pastor Matt, thank you so much for sitting in today and taking the place of our beloved Jeff Waterman. He's just down south this particular weekend, helping his family out with a move, actually.
Yep, so I'm happy to fill in, and hopefully I'll be able to cover any of the gaps that were missed or give a good overview of what was talked about.
Yeah, that's right. And you'll be, in fact, our preaching pastor this coming weekend.
That's correct. So hopefully I'll be prepared for that as well.
Right, I hope so. And that's March 23rd, this coming Sunday. 10 o'clock in the morning is when our services start.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's correct. So hope you'll be able to join us for that.
Yeah. And so without having Pastor Jeff here this particular week for this episode, normally what we do is we kind of do a little reprise. We talk about what happened during the previous Sunday. We talk a little bit about the reflection element, and then we answer the questions about that particular sermon, if there were any. Without Pastor Jeff here this particular week, though, what we're gonna do instead is an overview of where we've been within our Reignite Hope sermon series, and then also looking forward to your sermon, which is this coming Sunday, and then just kind of where are we headed with 2 Thessalonians, right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, very good. So let's talk about that a little bit. We started hope as like the theme of where we're looking since just before Christmas. It was the Advent sermon series, Rediscover Christmas, where we rediscovered love, joy, peace, and then the culmination of that was hope for our actual Christmas service. We then use that as a launching pad or a springboard into our Reignite Hope sermon series, which we've been in since Christmas, and it's been every week throughout 1 Thessalonians. We're about to start 2 Thessalonians this coming weekend.
That's right, yeah, and so it's a really important theme, and 1 Thessalonians is a short book, but there's a lot in it, and so it's been really interesting to dive deep into it and see what Paul is talking about with the Thessalonian church, and especially with the idea of reigniting hope. I think a lot of people understand the concept of hope in Christ, and especially with Christmas.
Yeah.
The whole season is about hope being brought down to earth because of Jesus' birth. But I think for a lot of people, it's easy to kind of start to lose hope. And even for Christians who have been Christians for a long time, you can start to wane in your faith or wonder where God is and how to interact with Him on a deeper level. So I think this series has been really important. So
yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that First Thessalonians is a short book. Mm-hmm. It is only 5 chapters. 2 Thessalonians is even shorter.
Yeah,
it's
that's
only
right, yeah.
3 chapters. So we'll be in that 2 Thessalonians book, that letter, until Easter. So that'll be April 20th this year. We're looking forward to all of what that brings. And in fact, I'm looking forward to Easter a lot because we're doing baptisms again during this coming service.
I'm excited to see that. Last year, it was so cool seeing all the people who were getting baptized. Some of whom signed up in advance, and some were pretty spontaneous. So that was really cool to see God at work, and hopefully we can see that again this year.
Absolutely beautiful. And in fact, that reminds me of the reflection element from this previous Sunday. I had the opportunity to be in the congregation rather than up on the stage this past weekend, which was a treat. And being a part of that reflection, which, by the way, for anyone who wasn't there, we had our worship team sing the blessing. First, they sang it over the congregation, the first verse, the first chorus, and then they invited the congregation to stand and then sing to each other, like across the room. So the congregation, it was a beautiful moment to see people with their hands raised, literally just after we had laid on hands and prayed for each other around the church. Now the congregation is like raising their hands and blessing the other side of the congregation, receiving that as well. It was a powerful moment.
Yeah, I think so. And it's a good reminder that God has given us each other as a body, as His body, and we're supposed to work together to do His will. And so we are here to encourage and equip each other. We're not just here to hear from Pastor Jeff or myself or sing some songs. Yeah. Those things are important, but that's not the main purpose. The main purpose is to worship God first and foremost, and then together work to do His will and to see how He's working in our lives and how we can benefit each other and our community.
Yeah, what a beautiful and powerful display of the fruits that Paul and the other apostles, those evangelists and our forefathers, right, that the fruits of what they have done and the persecution that they had to endure and what it has come to today, where Christianity is the world religion, right? So seeing the people today utilizing, or rather displaying, what our subtitle for this sermon series was. So it was Reignite Hope, but then the subtitle was a lifestyle of hope. And we're seeing that within our church, the fellowship coming together, unity coming together. And as we've kind of spent time through First Thessalonians, we're exemplifying some of these things that we've read about them, the famous faith, right? Responding to the evangelistic call that Paul and the other apostles have made there. I thought that was beautiful. And as we look through just an overview of what First Thessalonians has brought us, and as we're looking forward to what Second Thessalonians is bringing us, what were some of the aspects of First Thessalonians? Wow, I don't know why it's a tongue twister some days to say that.
Yeah, it is.
Thessalonians. But what were some of those aspects that really just like stuck out to you, or maybe something that you might have had a fresh take on reading through First Thessalonians this time around?
Yeah, I think just connecting it with the book of Acts, chapter 17, where it talks about Paul going to Thessalonica, and he does not have a lot of time there with them. Less than a month is the amount of time that he's able to be with the people in person. And for him to be so connected to them and so concerned about their well-being after being forced out of their city, and, he's miles and miles away by this point. He's in Corinth, but he's still concerned about them. And so he hears a positive report, and just the fact that that church was able to take that little nugget that Paul was able to leave with them and grow it into a strong faith for each of the members there is just astounding. And it's really inspiring to know, like, God is not going to leave you. He's not going to forsake you. He's not going to leave you in the dust. He will continue to work in you. So even if someone that you really looked up to is taken away, or if there's a way that something that was seemed like part of the foundation isn't there, Christ is still the foundation. And so if you're leaning on him, he will provide what you need, and he gives you the direction to reignite your hope, even if these other things that were important to you aren't necessarily there. So
you mentioned the word nugget, and Paul he's planting seeds, I guess might even be a better metaphor for that. Where, because then they have the whole thing with, I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, and all these other things. Well, okay, one person seeds, another person waters, but it is always God who gives the growth.
Exactly.
Right? So it's great to see the fruit of what he's been planting actually, being harvested and coming to be famous. And we're now being able to enjoy these things today. So I love that. Great response. Just to kind of continue the overview through First Thessalonians, they do have the famous faith at the beginning. Paul reminds them of the ministry that he had with them in the time that he spent with them, those 3 weeks. He's longing to see them again. And that's really something as well, very interesting. This is Saul of Tarsus that has become Paul, right? The evangelist. And this is a guy that was hating on Christians, didn't agree with the movement, killed them, et cetera, signed off on it. And now he has such love for people that he's never really met before or spent much time with. And I believe that this is just the Holy Spirit. This is the display of God's love for all mankind, for all people, wishes none of them to perish, but wants to save all of them. And we're seeing that in Paul's actions here. Only 3 weeks spent with these people, yet he cares for them so deeply. He writes them not only one letter, but a second letter to kind of clarify some things.
Exactly,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So Paul longs to see them again. And then he discusses, the how to live that life that is pleasing to God. And then, of course, the coming of the Lord is how he finishes this letter. The day of the Lord as well. And, this leads to the second letter. So it might be a good segue into your upcoming sermon, as you are about to be teaching us all what that first chapter of Second Thessalonians is all about.
Yeah, I think, and I will probably share this on Sunday, but it seems to me that the way that this second letter gets written is because it's just like if you're at work and if you're taking a half day on Friday and you send an email to your work team and you're like, hey, I'm taking a half day. Here are the things that need to happen. See you Monday. And then if one person misunderstands something, and then so they reply to the email thread, and then through all of that, it becomes even more chaotic and more fraught with problems. And then you come back on Monday and you're like, whoa, hold on. Like,
Yeah.
here's what I meant by that. And this is what this letter feels like. It was only written less than a year after First Thessalonians was written. And so I think it seems like at some part something got lost in translation. And so the Thessalonians get the letter from Paul. In fact, at the end of First Thessalonians, he says, "I put you under oath before the Lord to have this letter read to all the brothers."
Yeah.
So it's read before everyone, and I'm sure it may have been something about, Jesus will come like a thief in the night, and everyone's like, okay,
what?
does that mean I missed it? Like,
Yeah.
is it coming tomorrow? Like, how will I know when it actually happened? And so they're super focused on that part of it, and Paul's like, well, hold on, that's not the main point that I was trying to get at. So this letter is a follow-up letter to, like you said, clarify some of those things and quell some of those concerns that the Thessalonians have, because the day of the Lord is important, that we should be looking forward to, and we should be that we should be alert for. Jesus tells the parables of the servants, some who are faithful, some who are not. He tells the parable of the 10 virgins, 5 of whom are prepared and 5 are not. And so they need to be ready for the bridegroom when he comes. So we do need to be alert, but if we over obsess about it, we'll get caught up in those things and miss some of the things that God really wants us to focus on. So that's kind of the overview, the apparent reason why Paul writes this letter. And so the first chapter rather, is clarifying, hey, you're going through these afflictions, and it might feel like God is distant. It might feel like God's not taking care of you, but don't worry, he will provide relief. And for those who are afflicting you, leave it to God for that. He will. It is up to the Lord to have vengeance, right? Not for us to avenge, but up to the Lord. He will deal with them justly. And that goes back to what you said, the Saul-Paul thing. Like, Paul being able to write to the Thessalonians, talking about the people that are afflicting them and saying that God's judgment will be on them, as someone who, like you said, previously approved of the affliction of the Christians, who was there when Stephen was stoned and approved of his execution. And so Paul has a personal connection to that, and I think implies that the way that they respond to the affliction might turn the hearts of the people who are doing the causing the suffering, and maybe those people will be saved just like Paul was.
Wow. That would be very difficult for anyone to do, to endure through the affliction. And we have some historical context. We have some tells because of the historical context into some of their mindset and what is going on here. These Thessalonians, it's a spiritually oriented culture already, because this is a harbor town, very, very big city with people coming from all over the world to visit this location and do trading and the merchants and all the other stuff like that. There's a lot of different religions and spirituality happening in their area. These are people that it seems like, from how Paul has written to them the first time and how they responded to such a short duration that Paul was with them, these are people that are perhaps 0 to 100 mile an hour type people. They're famous for their faith. Okay, great. You're telling us something new. There's something that's going to be happening. Jesus is the way. Awesome. 100 miles an hour in that direction. And Paul's like, wait a minute. Let me clarify some things along the way here. But they're getting really stuck up even on the first letter with the day of the Lord and the coming of the Lord. And now he's clarifying again. The tells that I'm kind of seeing here are that if he's warning them about idleness and things along that nature, standing firm through this affliction, perhaps these are people that are going, oh, the day of the Lord is either coming or it already came, and I'm going to quit my job so I can be ready for this thing, or I'm going to quit working over here just so I can serve in this area. And he's like, now, wait a minute. These people that are working or serving, you're not, you need to actually put some effort into this. So it's like those who don't work don't eat. Right? But maybe there's something within their minds that are saying there's a lot of confusion about this, and they think it's happening right away. Now, of course, we are about 2,000 plus years distanced from this thing, but we also have the same message. That's tricky. And so Paul's trying to give them some clarification with, okay, Christ is coming. Yes. Here's how you should live your life while waiting. But that doesn't mean that you give up on the world or life. And and here are some things to look forward to, the man of lawlessness and things like that. Do you have anything more that you want to share about what Second Thessalonians might entail along all that?
Yeah, actually, there's an essay by C.S. Lewis that I read a while back, and I'll need to refresh my mind because there was a lot in it. But it was called "The World's Last Night," and so it's about Christ's return. And basically, C.S. Lewis was saying the same kind of thing that Paul is. Just be aware of Christ's return, be expecting it, know that it's imminent, but don't obsess over it. Don't let it hinder you from being faithful and doing the work necessary. I think, like you were saying, the Thessalonians might have looked at it as, oh, well, if he's coming and I'm supposed to be ready, then I'm just going to sit here and watch. But that is a foolish way to do it. And as Paul is clarifying, your faithfulness is how you're sitting and watching. You doing the work of the Lord is how you are faithfully waiting for his return. And so C.S. Lewis says the same thing. He says something to the effect of, it's like being 70 years old and recognizing your mortality, knowing that you don't have much time left. Like maybe you have 1 year, maybe you have 20 years, you don't know. But, it's not like someone who's in their teens or 20s where they think they have their whole life ahead of them. So they're becoming more aware of their death is coming, their death is imminent. But if someone is 70 and only thinking about their death, they're not going to be much good. They might as well just die, because if that's all they're thinking about, they're not going to be of good use to themselves or anyone else. But he says someone who is 70 should have a will prepared because they know their death is imminent, but they shouldn't be overly obsessed with it. So it's kind of in the middle of the two extremes, where on the one hand you might have like completely obsessed with it, and on the other hand completely ignoring it. And what Paul and C.S. Lewis are both trying to say is, no, be aware of it, let it inform you, but that information should lead you to more faithfulness, should lead you to more action rather than passivity.
I love that. It reminds me of the phrase, the person is so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good, right? Are there any particular points or areas within this upcoming sermon, this coming Sunday, when you're teaching, that we might nip it in the bud, I guess, some areas where there could be some confusion, or areas where you know already, okay, I'm going to need to clarify this or spend a little bit extra time on this? Is there anything like that you can look forward to and say, okay, let's dance in there a little bit right now?
Yeah, one of the really challenging parts about this passage is Paul talking about the judgment for those who are causing the affliction. And in chapter 1, verse 9, it says, "They will suffer the punishment of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might when he comes on that day to be glorified in his saints." And so I think people can get kind of tripped up on that. Obviously, that's a big question that a lot of people have, is like, how can a good God allow hell or send people to hell and all that kind of stuff? And then even within Christianity, there are a lot of different views of hell or judgment. What does that look like? And I think we can get overly obsessed with that too. Just like people can get overly obsessed with what the day of the Lord looks like, oh, how many years of tribulation, and will it be a literal or a figurative type of thing with all the things in Revelation. So they can get overly obsessed with that and get caught up in the details, miss the forest for the trees kind of a thing. It's the same thing with this. It's not for us to know exactly what every detail will look like, but to understand that God is in control, and it is his judgment that is good and just. And so we are called within that to be faithful. In fact, Paul is talking here about being suffering as part of the worthiness of our calling, that we are suffering just like Christ has suffered, and we are suffering for the good, which Peter talks about in 1 Peter. But as long as we are doing what we need to be faithful, that's what we can control. We can't determine other people's salvation or lack of salvation. We need to be faithful. God will determine what needs to be done about others. And so, like we mentioned earlier, to respond to the affliction in a way that will show Christ to those who are afflicting us, with the hope that they will come to know the gospel of Christ.
Yeah. Wow. That's very good, Matt. That's very good. There were some things that you quickly said and passed over, but we unfortunately don't have the time to get into a lot of those things during this particular episode. One of which, though, is that very common apologetics question. You know, if God is good and all-knowing, how could that God send people to hell, whether it's eternal damnation and ruin or annihilation, as some also believe? So that's one of those very basic, fundamental or foundational questions that apologists deal with on a regular basis. And so I encourage you guys out there, like we can't just give a blanket statement answer. We could have multiple examples right now and answers, but I think it would be better served for you guys if you did some research on your own into that matter. There are a lot of very, very smart and talented people, apologists out there that can answer that question. If God is good and all loving, then how can there be, well, there a few of those questions can either go, how can there be evil in the world? Did he create evil? Or how can he justify sending people to hell and things along that nature? How can an all-loving God send somebody to that place? And so that'll be a discussion for another time, I would assume there. And if
there are any questions about that, like especially if there are any more specific questions, any aspects of that that you would like more, obviously you can submit a question, and we'd be happy to try and cover it next week on the podcast as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of wish that this Second Thessalonians letter was a bit longer, because there's a lot of very challenging phrases and verses and texts within what Paul has written throughout these 3 small chapters. But let's get into reading this, and the next few weeks are going to be very exciting and interesting for all of us, I'm sure. I highly recommend that you guys dive into this word and then write us questions. Write us in the concerns and questions you might have. Hopefully we'll be able to address those as clearly as possible, or at least send you in the right direction to find some answers. Very good. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. Episode 10 in the books for Overflow. And we'll be looking forward to seeing you guys this coming Sunday. It'll be March 23rd. And, we're going to be starting 2 Thessalonians with Pastor Matt Bruner as our teaching pastor this coming weekend. 10 o'clock in the morning. See you guys then. Thanks so much for hanging out. Bye, everybody.